Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon if you're in another location. Today we're going to run through some of the project management tools and work that folks on the team have been doing to help support the growth of the project and to help things run a little more smoothly as the project grows. So today, we'll be following the agenda that's listed in the tutorial repo. The bit.ly link for that is bit.ly/Jupyter PJM tools. And we asked the core team to bring a piece of homework with them today, and that was to go to the project management repo, issue number 44, and record any tools that they've found to be really useful, whether it's in this project or on another project that they've worked on. So in this way, part of the purpose of this tutorial is to do knowledge sharing and help make visible some of the work that folks have been doing on the project. So that will give us a good record of tools that people want to bring up. Just a quick note about I'll move to the agenda. This is our agenda for today. I'm going to give a brief overview of project management, very brief, and then just talk about kind of the state of our current Jupyter project management tools. It's certainly a work in progress. And then I should note that you don't see this in the agenda, but we're going to do some discussion after each presentation here, because they're going to be fairly different in terms of what they aim to accomplish. So I wanted to kind of use the energy from the talk to help guide the discussion directly after the presenter finishes. So we'll have a short discussion after each of the talks, and then overall discussion at the end. So we're scheduled to go for about 2 hours. We don't have to take up the whole time, but we're all highly caffeinated in this room, so hopefully everyone else out there also has some of their creature comforts nearby. So settle in and we'll get started. Let me just ask everyone, anyone have any questions before we get going? I want to make sure we're all on the right page, the same page before we start. You're all on mute, so. Okay. Nope, great. Couple coughs. Okay, so what is project management? So project management is management of projects, and project is defined by the Project Management Institute as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Project is temporary in that it has a defined beginning and end time, and therefore a defined scope and resources. A project is unique in that it is not a routine operation, but a specific set of operations designed to accomplish a singular goal. So one of the common needs for software projects currently are end-to-end project managers. So someone who can help guide the initiation phase and then basically help lead the project through to completion, which is deploying software and moving it into more of a maintenance phase. So when I think of project management, this is what I think about. There are other roles that within the software development space that serve different purposes. You have release managers, product managers, program managers. It can be a long list, but those are kind of the main roles. And in the Jupyter project, I serve in kind of a cross program manager, project manager role. So I have the great fortune of being able to kind of telescope in and out from high level stuff on the project to working more and more with some of the development work. That's pretty recent. I've been working in GitHub a lot more. I think starting to look at the release cycles is my first foray into that with this team. I have led technical projects at other organizations. Okay, so my question here is, how do we decide what projects are for Project Jupyter. During the after the spring 2016 dev meeting, and I started the week after that meeting. So a survey was sent out asking the team about people's experience with project management tools. So the questions were, do you have prior experience with a project management tool that could help guide the decision-making process? What existing challenges do you hope will be solved by adopting a project management tool or project management approach in general? And then based on the outcomes of the spring 2016 dev meeting, what would you like to see the project accomplish in the next 3, 6, and 12 months? So the responses to this survey kind of helped me get oriented in the job and start developing a plan for a prioritized plan for implementing some structure around what the team's doing. So I also interviewed many of the core devs when I started to get an idea of what some of the key items we needed to start working on were. Okay, so I just read through those. So I've summarized the, let me get out of this really quick. So I've summarized the responses of that survey, and we had some great responses with tools. And let me just say beforehand that a tool is it's one solution. It's good to know what you're trying to do before you adopt the tool. A tool is not going to solve all your problems. So for me, I'm always trying to look at kind of what the underlying needs are instead of just kind of picking up tools to see if they're going to work or not. So, you know, I'd like to kind of continue to query the team to see what the needs are, and then go find tools that that would be helpful. So let's see. So folks responded with some of the more well-known tools that are out there. So Trello, Waffle, Jira, ZenHub, Smart Sheets, and there were some other ones like Slack and Glip. But I wouldn't consider those as project management tools for a team like this. I think we're looking for more structure. So, you know, I did attend one day of the spring dev meeting, and I was there for the part of the Jira discussion. I understand it's probably too heavy for this team. And so we kind of abandoned the Jira idea pretty early on in the game. And, you know, once we learned that GitHub Projects was coming down the road, I think I just kind of buckled down and waited for that to be deployed. So that was deployed before the holidays this year, and I'll talk later today about what we've been building out in GitHub Projects. Some other responses to the questions. So in terms of existing challenges, folks hope will be solved by adopting a project management tool or approach in general. There were a lot of comments around communication and organization. So at the time I joined the project, there was a lot of need for just creating more opportunities to communicate and better ways to communicate across the team and organize the work that was being done. I think I started shortly after the big split. So I think everybody was working on trying to get oriented and trying to figure out how things were going to work. I feel like things have kind of stabilized a little bit more since then, which feels pretty good. But I know that there are still a lot of challenges in terms of moving work through that we face. So other comments were prioritization, understanding what the vision and the project direction is. So having this shared vision and making it very visible and audible. And then tracking impact. So how do we show that we've achieved what we set out to do? So these are all things that we can look at different methodologies for sussing out and also employing different tools. So finally, we asked the question about what folks hope to accomplish in 3, 6, and 12 months. So this is just raw data here, and I hope to have some time at some point to make this a little more visually appealing. But in the 3 months, folks were really interested in having a clear roadmap and clear outline for what the team is to accomplish over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and certainly by the next dev meeting. So we made an effort to communicate that in the fall dev meeting, and we'll continue to work on improving kind of that circling back of the commitments that we made in the previous dev meeting. So again, 3 months was a lot of folks asked for improved communications and roadmap. So that's what I focused on in the early months. So as the first project manager for Jupyter, there's a lot of groundwork to lay down. And so a lot of what I've been doing has been very behind the scenes and laying down the foundation and setting a baseline for what we do moving forward. I think in the next few months, we'll start seeing kind of the fruits of that labor, and particularly with some input from the devs on the team, because without knowing what you guys are working on and what needs you have, I can't go in the right direction. So it's been really helpful to have Jason and Brian and Grant and Min and Matthias contributing different types of models for tracking work and to making things more efficient. So I won't go too much. We're between the 6 month and the 12 month timeline here. Ironing out the kinks and the processes was 6 months. Higher engagement with the community and the implementation of certain sub-projects. And then in 12 months, folks were looking for total world domination. So I think we're getting close there. So it's been really impressive to see Jupyter grow throughout many different communities, not only the scientific community, but in the data science community and the education communities. So that's been really cool. So those are the results for that survey, and that's what continues to drive my work. So that's kind of the brief overview that I wanted to provide. If folks are hungry for more background and information about project management, I'm happy to provide it. But I did want to spend today focusing more on the tools that have been built and how they can be used more widely across the team or modified to help you and your teams. I will also add that we created teams, the teams during this time frame, and there's a great visual of our teams that I hope to share in the next couple weeks. All right. So I think from there, let me just check my agenda. I think from there, we can have a discussion if folks have anything they'd like to bring up at this time or questions they'd like to ask. Nope. Okay. So then we'll move into the metrics, and that's Brian and Jason. Great. Did you have a question?
I was going to say that should we potentially create a Dropbox paper where we can take notes, or should we just do this within the issue
sure.
repo?
That'd be great. Can you set that up, Grant?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Thanks. All right. Jason and Brian.
I think I'm going to start out here. Let me share my screen. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
All right. So can you see my share entire screen? There we go. All right. So can you see the screen here?
Yes.
All right. So thanks so much, Jamie, for leading this off and for putting all the work into getting this going. It's definitely something that we've been needing for a long time. And one thing that I wanted to mention before I start talking about the GitHub issues is the slight shift in terminology that I think is really important that Jamie's introducing, in that from the project management perspective, a project is a time-scoped temporary thing that exists, which is different from how we have traditionally referred to the quote the project, which is we more in our minds probably link that up to GitHub repositories or sub-projects or Project Jupyter. And so I think there's two meanings of the word project there that we have to be aware of in this context. But it's very helpful to understand sort of the time-scoped meaning of project in this context. What Jamie's asked Jason and I to talk about is how we're using labels in the Jupyter Lab repository, and this is sort of grown organically as Jupyter Hub has been developed. And even though I'm the one here at least introducing it, I want to emphasize I'm not the person who came up with this alone by any means. It really started with the sort of core developers of Jupyter Lab, and we've sort of modified it over time. And the way I want to introduce it is to show you our labels page. And basically what we quickly noticed is that the flat namespace of labels in GitHub made it really difficult for us to understand the many issues that we have. And so what we basically have done is to introduce a pseudo namespace in that we have four different types of labels. And those different types of labels are prefixed with a string at the beginning of each label, and they also, each different type has a color. I think the thing that I want to start with is the component labels, or the component type. And these are basically the unique parts of our software. So there's a notebook component, a text editor component, a document registry component. And for the most part, we assign a small number of component labels to a given issue or pull request. I would say maybe 90% of the time it's just a single component, although there are situations where we'll assign multiple components for work that spans multiple components. The next is what we're currently calling the cat or category type, shown here in purple. And another way of thinking about this is these are essentially more traditional tags, in that these labels can be applied to sort of as modifiers on top of a given component. So for example, we might apply the documentation or the design and UX label across different components. And so if someone wants to understand which components need documentation work right now, they could click on the cat documentation tag or label. After using this for a while, we're thinking about converting the cat prefix here to just being tag. We feel like that's probably a better representation of how we're using this type of label. And the next type of prefix is status. And so this is basically to denote the current status. You can see some of the statuses here: blocked, duplicate, help wanted, needs discussion, needs info, needs review, needs user testing, won't fix, work in progress. And then the last type of label is the actual type prefix. And this is basically one of 4 different options: bug, enhancement, maintenance, or question. And we're rigorous on this one to only apply a single one of those. And I'll talk about why here in a second, in terms of why we really work hard to apply only one of those. We will acknowledge that at times applying this label, either bug, enhancement, maintenance, or question, isn't obvious. There's times where things are sort of half bug, half enhancement, or half enhancement, half maintenance. And in spite of that, we tend to just pick one, and we don't find that it dramatically that there's any sort of downside to just picking one rather than picking multiple of them. And the main thing that we've tried to do with this is to introduce a more formal data model for the labels, and in particular to identify the different types of relationships between labels and PRs and issues, either being one-to-many or many-to-many. And so, for example, the yellow labels here, there's a one-to-many relationship. For status, it's typically a one-to-many relationship. So you would typically pick a single status, not always. For components, it tends to be one-to-many, although occasionally it's few-to-many. And then the other for cat or tags, that's a true many-to-many relationship. And one way that we're using this is that we've started to do visualizations based on this. And so here's a simple notebook that we've written that downloads the issues for Jupyter Lab, assembles them into a data frame, and then makes a visualization using, currently I'm using Altair for this. And so, for example, here I'm encoding the component as bars in the Y direction here. The length of the bars is the number of open issues for those components. The colors of the bars are then the type. So either maintenance, enhancement, bug, question. This query didn't have any questions listed, or none. And so this, we're using this to get a broad picture of what needs to be done. And then the milestones are the different facets here. So you can see that this is not an up-to-date run, but for 1.0, we have a lot of work to do on the notebook, the application, and then in unspecified components. Most of our work on 1.0 is still enhancements, but quite a bit of bug work. Here's the backlog. As you would expect, most of the backlog is enhancements, which are the green. And then here's the beta. Again, this is not quite up to date. And so for the beta, we can see that we're slowly moving to the point where we have fewer new enhancements, but a lot of maintenance and bug work getting ready for that release. And a lot of our choices about the data model and the labeling schema were driven by wanting to make visualizations like this and potentially also start to track these things over time. This is a single snapshot, but we would hope that for a big release like Jupyter Lab 1.0, over time we would see that the number of enhancements we're working on goes down, and then the maintenance and the bug work kicks in coming up to the release. Based on this, I've submitted a pull request to the governance repository describing this schema and in broad terms. And so I'm showing the pull request here. It also describes how we're using milestones. One change that we've made relative to how we used to manage milestones is that we are using a new milestone we're calling backlog, basically for everything beyond all issues and pull requests beyond basically the one we're working on and the next one. So for Jupyter Lab, that's the beta and 1.0. Everything else is in backlog. Traditionally in the notebook repository, we had a wish list for issues we hadn't committed to implementing. what we sort of found was that the wish list for the notebook was basically the place that issues went to die. And we felt like the backlog, at least how we're starting to use it, is that we wanted to have a place that would force us as core developers to go back and revisit regularly and say, all right, we just released the beta. Let's create a 2.0 milestone and go through the backlog and understand which of the backlog issues do we want to target at 2.0. We felt like it was a slightly more proactive way of managing and making decisions about the backlog. We got a lot of really good feedback on this. Some of the questions that we got were, how would you implement this on a smaller repository that doesn't have the complexity of the Jupyter Lab, where there's maybe only one component? And so there's been a lot of discussion about sort of a simplified version of this, but that still has some of the data models that could be visualized like this. And then other small things like just renaming some things. So right now we're using type, component, cat, and status. And so we're thinking about relabeling cat as tag. And then the other is you'll notice our current label schema has spaces. And some of the work that Matthias has been doing for more programmatic management of issues, having spaces and labels is a little bit difficult. And so we're planning on just removing those spaces. I think that's the overview I wanted to do. And then I wanted to turn it over to Jason, who is going to talk some about this as well.
I would suggest removing the colon as well, because when you want to filter something on GitHub, you have to use label colon name of the label, and the colon conflict with the colon that has to be used in the GitHub syntax.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's feedback like that that's really helpful.
The other thing I want to point out is that a couple of these labels are standards across all of GitHub because they are on repository by default. In particular, the need review and help wanted. And many places outside of Jupyter say, hey, if you want to search for something which is new contributor friendly, just search for this label with this color. And having that being a different color and a different name on our repository make a global search on GitHub for our project impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add just one observation that to me, the difference between component and cat is component is talking about where in the code to go look for something, and cat is I'm in the mindset of doing UI work, what is there to do? Or I'm in the mindset of doing documentation work. So cat is sort of filtering for the type of work or even the group of people working on something, and components filtering for where in the code base are the changes needed. That's all I wanted to say, but I did want to see if Steve or Darian or anybody else has been using this in Jupyter Lab a chance to say what they thought in experience in using it.
I guess I'll chime in. I've been using the categories and components aggressively, and I think it's, at least for me, it's made management across the issues a lot easier to reason about. I haven't had too much trouble sitting and thinking, what should this be called? The ones we have been pretty intuitive to use. As we go along, we've added new components, but I haven't seen a need to add any other of the other types. They've seemed sufficient for what we're doing. Yeah, overall, I've been really happy with it. No complaints so far. It's really helped me focus on what I need to do next by having these labels on there. And I like the taxonomy, working well.
Yeah, one thing that's probably worth mentioning is I've started to do regular triage passes. And the way that I find myself doing triage passes now is by milestone and component. So I would say, all right, I'm going to sit down and do a triage pass on all beta issues related to the notebook component, or everything related to the notebook design, or all design and UX on the beta. And we're not, so we only have 236 open issues right now, which is smaller than some of our repositories like the Notebook and IPython, which have 400 or 500 or even close to 1,000. We're sort of at the threshold where it gets really difficult to track everything in Jupyter Lab, and having this taxonomy I find really helpful in terms of narrowing in on working sort of on one area of the project that I'm interested in or currently working on.
And I'll say one other thing, and that is we really appreciate the comments from, Brian posted up the governance repo just to put it somewhere that people could comment on. I agree with Men that the status is sometimes sort of the most useless one of the dimensions of this labeling system. It's often there's not one status, and it doesn't necessarily tell you anything about it. We hoped it might track information after the fact, but it may or may not be really useful there. But lots of you guys have been using labels for lots of things. I'm really curious the thoughts or what you've been doing, how you've been doing things differently, and here's what we've been doing, but really it's a larger discussion to try to learn from each other here.
I can see folks having feedback once they start using it. It seems like a good tool. I've used this kind of system at other organizations. I've also deployed Jira at a couple organizations as well. So having that visualization layer, like the widgets to look at how many in different ways. So slicing the data to look at what's left, what's the most work intensive component or whatever. It's nice to be able to visualize the issues for sure. I always have to get my hands on something to really think through it and provide feedback.
Right. I guess I was asking a broader question, a more general question. That is, other people have been using labels on Jupyter Hub and all sorts of other projects. What have you seen from the system or ways that other people have been using labels? Or are there other systems, Men?
Sounds like Carol.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's cool. Go ahead, Min.
I think I made most, I don't remember now, but I think I made most of these comments on Brian's PR. But we did most of this taxonomy on when IPython was one repo before, and at least in my experience, I found especially the type label.
Hey, Brian, you're still sharing your screen.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Ultimately, the only thing that helped, the main thing that helped me was milestones. Just when do we need to get this work done, and using that as things that need attention. But that, I think the main things to think of in my mind are how does labeling help bring the right issues to people's attention at the right time? And for me, it's of course everybody works differently and has different areas of responsibility. And so I think tailoring the collection of labels to the diversity of interest and or expertise, that I never found it a useful distinction between whether it was something was a bug or an enhancement, because it was still work that needed to happen, and it didn't make a difference too much whether I was fixing something or adding something. But categories were useful. Like I don't know how some component works, so I'll trust someone who understands it better to pick that up and that kind of things. Yeah, I think that was the figuring out which labels are necessary. So the first time around, I think it was the type one was required and maybe a status one, so that the first round of triage was always identify all the issues that are without classification. I don't know if you talk about how you deal with making sure everything's classified, Brian? I don't remember if you mentioned that. Because that was something that was... Go ahead.
Yeah, the way we're dealing with that right now is basically all of us, when new issues come in, we just classify them with this schema. We typically try to add a type, a milestone, and at least a component. And it honestly, now that we're doing it on a regular basis, and we've all of our existing issues are cataloged in this way, it's actually not, that part of it is not too bad. Now, I'm guessing that once Jupyter Lab is released and we have a lot of users opening issues, that initial triage is going to obviously become much more challenging, and that's something that on the IPython and Jupyter Notebook repos continues to be really challenging. Just the volume of issues is extremely high. Another challenge is, and I don't know if GitHub has addressed this, is that labeling issues requires write permissions on a repo. And so it's not something we can sort of ask the broader community to help out with, although I think Matthias has been thinking some about ways of addressing that with the stuff he'll be talking about. My thinking about the next steps on this would be to make changes to that governance repo document, and based on everyone's feedback, we've gotten a lot of good feedback, and then basically implement that on the lab and notebook repositories. And then I think the next step beyond that, it might be nice to create a GitHub bot that for repos that follow this scheme can basically automatically create the needed visualizations and post them on an issue somewhere. So we can have basically daily or weekly monitoring and visualizations of issues on a repo. I think this is the type of thing that...
Would that be a type of maintenance issue, or?
Probably. Yeah, I think that's where I put our current, I've been uploading visualizations by hand, and I think I have an issue open under maintenance. And so my hope is, if we do stuff like that, that different repositories across our different orgs can sort of choose to use this schema because it actually helps them with something, that it provides value. A lot of our repositories are small enough that you don't need a complex model and sort of taxonomy and data schema like this. But it still may be that we say, if you have a repository that has these prefixes, regardless of what comes after the prefix, we can automatically run, regular visualizations or things like that. So I think that's sort of what I'm thinking of exploring next with this.
Cool.
Great. Excuse me. Any other comments or reflections on the labeling?
One thing, it's a detail, but for me, exactly the same color for labels make it hard to see. I would like to have at least a small variation in saturation or luminosity. I don't know if I'm the only one with that. Whether I'm going to guess it's because I'm a slow reader, so having to actually I'm seeing things by color, and having the same color as the size just don't help. So would it be something possible to slightly change the shade?
Are you thinking of changing changing the shades of blue within component?
Yes.
Or is yeah, I think we can totally do something like that. I'll admit how we came up with the coloring scheme. Originally, we were just like hand-picking a color for each individual issue, and initially it started out, I think, with a little bit of like rational choice of colors. Eventually, we realized when the number of labels got large enough, it was essentially a random color selection. And Jason and I sat down one day and sort of randomly picked, like, all right, what's the simplest way we can color these? But yeah, offering different shades of blue, we can surely do something like that. And yeah, we can totally explore different variations. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Brian, this is Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Can you hear me? Hey, a couple things. Overall, I really like it. I agree with Min's sort of categorization thing with the type, but the bigger question I had is sort of along the same lines as Matthias with the color. I have a concern that I think it's fine to categorize or tag documentation and new contributors, but I think there should be a visual distinction, particularly on new contributors, because I think while this lends itself really well to somebody who's familiar with the project, it's a little overwhelming for somebody who isn't. And I know Grant had mentioned in the in the Dropbox paper that we may aggregate at some point the new contributor stuff, but I think even on a per repo basis, it's more welcoming to have that at least a different shade, if not a different color. And the same with documentation. It's just easier for somebody who's doing that and dedicated to that to just pick stuff out without it being the same exact color.
That's a really good point. And it goes along with Matthias's point that maybe that steps outside of the cat component that are prefixed labels, and the new contributor is just a standard GitHub new contributor in silver gray or whatever they have. And that way, that's even more welcoming if it's standard across all of GitHub.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's important is that the coloring of the issues doesn't in any way affect our ability to query those in a structured way and do visualizations. And so I think that's where, yeah, there's more flexibility, and I completely agree that it would be helpful to have either some issues colored differently or even like some called out in other ways.
Cool. And then one other update from when I was at the maintainer thing at GitHub the other week. It was pretty much a universal request to have a third layer of triaging abilities so that you didn't have to have complete write access. So GitHub knows that everybody wants that. So hopefully it'll come sooner versus later.
Great. That's a good news.
And that's it.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That was a really good discussion. I'm glad that we have the opportunity to have it. I think that this labeling schema is incredibly useful for getting insights into our issue log and our features that we want to develop. And certainly as a project manager, it's nice to be able to go in now and kind of start parsing out all the different things. So thanks, Brian, and Jason for developing that. Great. So next thing that we have on the agenda is I'll be providing you all with an update on some of the work that's being done on GitHub and GitHub Projects. Excuse me. So let me go over there now. Okay, so there's a lot going on this front right now, and I've been having conversations at a lot of different levels on GitHub Projects. And let me just go through this list of 6, and then I'll show you some examples of what we've been doing here on the Jupyter project and what's planned for the future, some of the targets that we're setting. So first, I started using GitHub Projects at the org and repo level for tracking high-level project stuff like events team members are presenting at, and some of our bigger initiatives. So, when the dev meeting is, when's JupyterCon, when are our funding reports due, things like that. And as we're able to make this tool more automated, I would love to create a more detailed schedule. Currently, it's very manual. So I don't want to put too much energy into it right now when it may potentially be more automated in the near future. Second, I'm working with some fellows at BIDS, the Berkeley Institute for Data Science, on an open source project dashboard. So this is an initiative that a couple fellows started, and they've been collecting input for what types of information should go in a dashboard for an open source project. So I'll share some of those with you in a minute. Third, we've been looking at ways to create the Jupyter release schedule and history. So I originally talked about this with Carol back in August, actually. And then just recently, Min kindly shared with me a script that he created to generate a release schedule, which I'm really excited about. And I'll show you in just a second. Fourth, I've been building up the Jupyter project management wiki that I'll show you in a minute. And this is the wiki in the project management repo. It's in its infancy, so right now I'm just kind of dropping links and ideas into different categories. But at some point, I hope it becomes a tool for people to turn to, especially folks who are new to the project, to get a good overview of how the machine runs under the hood. What else? I've also been communicating with folks at GitHub about our needs and some of the timing of the development that they have planned, so that can help us plan our own work. And then several, as we just saw with Brian's presentation, a number of developers on the team have been researching different tools. So I know Carol's been putting a lot of really great research work into this. Matthias has been working on his bot So I really appreciate all the feedback that and the resources that the team's been providing me over the last few months. It's been great learning about all these new, all the tools that are out there. So here's just an example of our org level projects, list of projects. So right now there's 3 projects, 3 main projects. Test 1 is just, that's the project that I try things out on. So I have a trial board for releases. I'll show you a screenshot of that in a minute. Like I said, I have the team conference and event calendar, and then I have our project schedule. So the team conference and event calendar is just for events that folks on the team are involved with in some way, or presenting, attending, serving on panels, etc. So if you are going to an event or giving a talk, please record it on this calendar. One plan that we have for this event calendar is finding a way to port this out to the Google Calendar that Anna created, because I know that she has different needs on her end, and I would like to facilitate that and helping her keep track of dates as well, because I know she's able to align, overlay our team calendar with several other calendars that she has there at Cal Poly. So I don't want her calendar to go away. I would love to be able to feed data to it from GitHub. And the reason I created this calendar in GitHub is the feedback that I've received on the Google Calendar is folks always forget the link, so they can never go back and find it when they need to record something. So this particular calendar, you can just go to the board, and let me just do that right now. This is a static page, but you can go to the board and, I'm trying to put my arrow over this, there, okay. Hit the plus sign. That will create a new card. It'll basically create a skeleton card, and you can just enter your information in the note box that they provide. So once it's there, I can actually create the issue, or you can create the issue. When you create the issue, you can assign it to yourself so that your little your head shows up in the lower right hand corner of that card, so we can see who's doing what. And when you do that, just please follow the format that's on the card. So it's the name of the event, the date, and the location. And we're kind of going back and forth on the date format, so I'm not going to be too particular about that right now. So this is the trial board for releases. So I thought this was a great idea at first, but this is cross repo, which is great. But as we continue to add new orgs, I'm not able to make cards or pull cards in from the issue logs from those different orgs. So the new widgets org, the Jupyter Lab org, the IPython org, I can't pull those into this board. So I created a card for the Jupyter 0.17 release here. So this is an example of what that note looks like without being an issue. So that's one way to do it, but it's very, very manual. So I don't think it's super sustainable as the project grows and the team, we have more and more releases. But of interest, let's see what's next here. Okay, let me just, while we're talking about releases, let me just share with you this awesome release calendar. Well, it's not a calendar, but it's a record of all of our releases that comes out of a script that Min developed. So hopefully, Brian, you and Cameron and I can work on this and find a way to port the most recent releases onto some place on our website that users can go to and check to make sure they have the most up-to-date stuff.
Great.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Min. And thanks to Carol for planting the initial seed on creating that with me. All right. Okay, so the next thing that I mentioned that we're working on is this BIDS open source project dashboard. The features of that dashboard are listed here. And I like this list because it's very specific on the types of information that these folks want. So information and features. So they're looking for automated labeling of pull requests and tickets, and I think that's something Matthias is working on a little bit. So we're making some progress there. I should also mention Matthias is on that, involved with that project as well. Whether he's got the time for it or not, he's helping propel the development of that. So these are the questions that that they're trying to answer with these dashboard widgets. The most active pull requests or hot topics, the PRs on which I've commented before, PRs that haven't seen any discussion, stalled PRs, issues with no discussion at all, discussion that stopped, and the time between the stalled discussion and now. New issues without any comments, list of oldest unmerged PRs, recently merged PRs referring to a ticket that hasn't been closed, duplicate PRs, so closing the same ticket, tickets being referred to many times, unmergeable PRs, PRs that pass the majority of tests, and issues that external projects refer to. So, I think, it's great that they've defined their needs so specifically that I think tools can be built around these questions. Then they're looking to build some bot-like features, so run tests, then merge, backport a pull request, which Matthias is working on, and rerun the tests, and then some Travis-like features as well. So I've communicated this with the GitHub contacts that we have to see what in this group of asks they would be able to build. In my initial discussions, they said that they're really only creating things called primitives. So I don't know if this is like a computer science term, but so they're building kind of the structure around enabling the work, but they probably wouldn't build widgets. I mean, there's some pulse. We have some pulse visualizations within each of the repos, but they probably wouldn't build a whole library of visualization tools for issues. So that was some of the initial feedback that I got. These are some of the tools that the BIDS team was looking at. High Five, HOMU, Repo Health, Git.org, and Waffle.io. Some folks said that the initial Waffle was a little bit buggy, but the bot itself hasn't been released yet. So the Waffle bot will allow automatic binning of issues into the project board categories, which would be awesome. So that would be a really great tool for creating a backlog, or if you have control over the settings, arranging the work so folks who are working on certain categories can just pull off the top of those columns. So pretty great. Oh, those are my kernels. That's my indication to stop. So that's what I have there. Oops. Yeah. Are there any questions on some? Oh, and are there any questions on any of that work? I do want Grant to give Grant a chance to comment. Grant did some experimentation and exploration of GitHub projects from the developer perspective, and he had some things that he did want to share with the team as well.
So I have one question regarding what you presented, Jamie. So the BIDS request for that project dashboard. What are the plans exactly? Are we going to build some sort of dashboard? Because one of my thoughts was, why don't we start creating some notebooks that do these things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the BIDS team is partnering with is it the Machine Shop? Yeah, some developers with this group called the Machine Shop, and they were going to try to take a first stab at developing these tools used in GitHub. So, my goal with the project management stuff is to not put too much on the team. If people come up with a fun side project and out of their own curiosity, they want to build something neat, that's awesome. But, I don't want to burden the team with too much tool building when really, we should be focusing on Jupyter and Jupyter development.
The other problem with making notebook is that you have to run them locally yourself. And that's a burden. Having to run something locally every time you want to see something is quite annoying, and especially for if you need to set up your own authentication, like ask someone to find their personal authentication token on GitHub and plug it into the right place, people will just not use it. And so the goal would be to have something which is hosted online, easy to deploy, and that every member of the community, not only the core dev, who understand how to log in on GitHub and have the right credential, can access.
Right. Okay.
I do see this sort of tension though, in that with the issue visualizations that I'm running currently, it's a notebook, and like it's really easy in a notebook to iterate and create different visualizations like that. But for me to offer that to like all of our repos, all of a sudden I essentially do have to do tool building. And so if there was a tool that worked simply through notebooks, that would be a huge win, right? Then we could just build notebooks that did whatever we wanted it to do, and sort of offer those notebooks as the sort of way of customizing a tool that does different things with the GitHub data.
Yes.
And I understand.
They would all build upon each other. Once someone built a notebook to pull all the issues that meet certain criteria, it would be easy to just modify that query to do something else.
Right. And so, but I totally get it, that Jamie, that you're saying, like, I think the core Jupyter devs don't want to shift gears and start to build tools for GitHub. But at the same time, like I have the notebook already, and between that notebook and the rest of the project using it, someone has to build a tool.
Yeah. So first step is share that notebook that you created, and then we can all play with it and expand.
Yeah. The thing is, though, like at some point, I'd like to get to a single source of truth when we're looking at metrics. So having one page that everybody goes to, that everybody sees as the same. So, that lists our primary goals. So, I think it's fine for project leads or team leads to, if they want to run their own sets of metrics, just to kind of keep a finger on the pulse and make sure things are moving forward. But in terms of maintaining a shared vision and being on the same page with what we're trying to accomplish, I'm definitely going to continue to work with GitHub and some of the folks in our community to look at tools that we can all go to and share and view at the same time. So, but yeah, there's nothing stopping you from creating a notebook or using Brian's notebook and doing stats on the issues.
Yeah, I think the difference here is what you're referring to is like very important to just get a big picture on the entire project. Whereas some of those bullet point items in that bids slide, there were things like, how can we query for issues that are they're opened a while ago, there was conversation, and then they went dormant, but they're still important. They need to get done. Being able to kind of like filter through issues in a way that GitHub doesn't allow us. That would be one use case where it's just something that would be useful for anyone that's maintaining a repo, to be able to just query GitHub in a way that's not, possible through GitHub's website.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And Jamie, I totally agree with you that we want to have a sort of this big picture, this project-wide unified picture. I think the difficulty right now is that like that the notebook that I have that does issue visualization, like that would be useful in the project-wide picture.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's a huge canyon between it being a notebook and being deployed to the whole project. And that I think I don't know how to solve that problem without myself sitting down and building the general tool that does issue visualization for GitHub.
Well, and that's why we're working with GitHub and other folks in the community to make it so we don't have to create that tool, so we can collaborate with others and use what they've built and incorporate it.
And I guess, I mean, obviously I'm not working with those people, but maybe bringing up to them the question of, could notebooks be used as one possible way of encoding something that gets incorporated into such a tool?
Sure.
Like that would be, I think, really helpful.
A couple really quick things, Brian. One of the things that GitHub had said to the maintainers that were there was they would like the communities sort of building stuff off of the API. So that's one thing. And then just the other day, O'Reilly forwarded to me, Kyle and Peter, I think, a proposal for a talk from folks in a university in Tokyo who've done a number of notebooks on operational deployment stuff. So I'll pass that repo link along to you guys and Grant as well, because it's some pretty cool stuff.
Cool, thanks.
Very nice.
Super. Okay, so let's move on to our final presentation by Matthias.
Yes, let's see if I can share. How do I share?
Jamie, can I do a little blurb on projects?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Okay, so I've been trying to use projects in a couple different ways. Just trying to see where it fits in between, just using issues or just using pull requests. And so just a couple of things that I've observed or learned. I've written them down in the Dropbox paper document. So some of the pros of GitHub Projects is that you can add issues and PRs to these boards, which is something that's not really possible in just the issues tab or just the PRs tab. So that's one thing, is you can add issues, PRs, and notes, which are neither. They're just notes that you can put in a board, if there's a need for that. They're also cross repo, so you'd be able to create a project for an entire org and add issues or PRs from multiple repos. So that's interesting. And these Kanban style boards are pretty popular, and I think it's just because it's a nice way to consume information for specific types of use cases. But one of the cons of GitHub Projects is that they're a lot of work to maintain. If the issues and PRs involved are constantly changing. And adding cards to a board is you have to drag it in one at a time. They don't have can't select multiple cards at the same time and drag them in, and there's no way to automate that process. I mean, I'm sure if we wrote a script we could do that, but in its current state you have to just do a lot of dragging and dropping. So the use cases that I've tried is tracking releases. And if you go to the Dropbox paper doc, you can I have a couple links here. And so it's been nice. I think that it's an improvement over simply having putting a to-do list in an issue. But like I said, the issues and PRs are constantly changing. There's new issues and PRs coming in marked with a milestone, and then there's others that the milestone changes for it, so then you have to remove it. So it's nice, but at the same time, I think it's a lot of work, and especially for this Notebook 5 release, it would probably take me 20 minutes just to sync it up to the current state of what's going on with that release. So it's maybe not the best tool for tracking releases, but it's there, so it's a possibility. I've also seen it used to track individuals' to-do lists. So on the Interact repo, I saw that a couple of the contributors created boards to basically share what they're currently working on, what they plan on working on. This isn't too different from just assigning yourself to issues and PRs, but it does provide a little context because, here's something that I'm currently working on. Here's something that I plan on working on next, might be something useful. Another potentially useful use case of these projects. And that's pretty much all I got. So I just wanted to share that with people. And if anyone else has been using projects, it would be nice to hear your own thoughts or feedback about them.
Yeah, certainly the automatic binning of the things would be extremely useful.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I mentioned that as well, that right now we're only tracking higher level work because it's a lot to pull each card in individually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Grant.
Okay. Sure.
Yes, take it away.
Entire screen. There.
Here we go.
Or sharing your screen. Yes. So just before, I wanted to point out that Min has this fantastic page, minrk.github.io/all-my-pools, which basically lists all the pull requests you have the right to merge. And you can filter by repository and organization. And that basically, I'm mostly working in that when I want to see which PR has to be reviewed. I added a link into the Dropbox, and you just need to authorize GitHub, and it works regardless of whether you're in a Jupyter project or not. And I think it's really great. Otherwise, let's go back to the presentation. So I'm going to show you quickly the bot I wrote recently. I started in December. I tried to, when I have free time, to add some features to it. So why did I write a bot? Mostly to screen my own itch. A number of GitHub activity are really repetitive and required me to keep switching context between the browser and the terminal. Mostly backporting PR. You had to be in the browser, you see that the PR have been merged. You need to take the PR number, go to your terminal, cd in the right directory, make sure that the repository is maybe pull on the right branch, that everything is clean, and you have to run a command that will do the backport, push the backport, and then you have to go back on GitHub and merge thing. And it was painful and taking quite a bit of time. And also it was pushing me not to backport things that were easy to backport, because backporting a typo, if it takes me 5 minutes, might not be worth it. So I decided to say, oh, well, what can I do to help that? And so I decided to write a bot, and I said, okay, it needs to be relatively simple. I don't want it to do the coffee or to completely manage everything, because it would take me too much time to write. So I decided to make something simple and painless, and I want it to be stateless. So that it can just be thrown regularly, and if it's crashed, it's fine. It won't be out of sync with GitHub. I can just restart it. I can just push new changes, and it should work. And hence the term Mr. Meeseeks, which is a character from Rick and Morty, which basically you can create such a character, and it does something for you, and just it disappears out of existence. And that's something that you need to keep in mind when you use a bot. You cannot dialogue with a bot. Once you give it a command, it will be spawned and just after disappear and not remember what has been done before. So how does it work? Once you've activated the bot on your GitHub repository or organization, every time a comment is made or an action is made on GitHub, Meeseeks box, which is the main program, will get the request. It can be CI has passed, CI has failed, or there is a new comment, or there is a new issue, or there is a new PR, or there is a new comment deleted. I'm mostly now handling only when a comment is made. And basically, if the comment is mentioning the bot with a specific name and the person has the right amount of permission on the repository, then the box will spawn a function that will live for a couple of minutes, that will get limited credential only to the repository where it was mentioned, do some back and forth with GitHub, depending on what you want it to do, and then poof, it will just disappear out of existence and don't remember what it has done before. And so I want the pluggability of this bot to be really easy. So usually commands are only one functions that take 2 arguments. Session object, which is basically hold the credentials for the repository you're acting on, and basically the rest of the arguments you pass to the command on in a comment on GitHub. And you just need to decorate this function with @admin, @write, or @everyone, depending on who you want to be able to emit this command. So if you do @everyone, for example, everyone on where the bot is installed can say @meeseeks_dev hello, and it will respond that it received the command. There is also some more explicit decorators to allow, for example, not only the admin of a repository, but also the PR's author to do things on their PR. So for example, a PR author can tag its own PR, and the admin can do that as well. And so some limitation of the bot, it has to do anything to do a first response in less than 15 seconds, and to finish all its thing it has to do in less than 2 minutes. And that's a limitation of running it on free Heroku instances. If it takes longer than that, Heroku will assume the program is stuck in an infinite loop or is not responding, and will just kill it and restart it. Let me just show you a demo. So you can find it here on the GitHub Meeseeks box organization. Meeseeks_dev is the bot, and every time I push a commit there, it will be automatically deployed on Heroku, and you have 2 test repository here. If you go onto the README, you can get some documentation of what you can ask to the bot with something that are in progress. And so, for example, here is an issue. You can just do, let me maybe zoom in a bit for the video. And it should take a few seconds, and if the WebSocket of GitHub works, I should get a reply relatively quickly. Let's refresh the page. Yeah. So it works. And basically, a lot of things you can do is do @mention backport, @mention open, close an issue. So you can, for example, ask it to close the issue, and it should close the issue. GitHub is not live refreshing, but yeah, now it's closed. It's useful, even if these actions are just available with buttons, it means that you can also do that by mail. Like, for example, this morning
I have a question. What happens if you press the blue button at the top of the box?
What? Oh, the top. It's basically in the comic. It's create a Meeseeks character. And so yeah, you can by mail, for example, you can respond to an email and say close, open, or tag. So for example, if you receive a mail like that, you could also respond tag, or have a list of comma separated tags, and it should automatically label things. You can of course backport, or let me see, I have a few links here. So you can merge by mail. So here is like this morning I replied by mail merge, and it automatically merge the request. So I didn't have to get. I could do that from my phone. You can also, for example, ask it when it's a PR to backport to and give it a PR branch number, and it will try to cherry pick the merge commit of the PR onto the old branch and automatically open another pull request on the old branch. So that's I've been using that quite a lot, mostly to backport, because backports take a couple of minutes, and so I can just issue a backport command and do something else, and then when I come back a few minutes later, the new PR is open and have the test suite that have been run, and I know if I can safely merge the PR on the old branch. And you can see that implementing a command is not that hard. So here I'm creating a command which PR authors and people who have commit rights to a repository can do. The command is called ready. So the person can do @Meeseeks dev ready. And what it will do, it will tag the PR with need review, and it will untag with waiting from author. This means that when you have a PR from an external contributor and that you ask it to review something, you can tag it as you need to do more work. We have a few comments on your PR, and remove the need review tag and add the waiting for author. And when the author has finished, you can mention the bot, and the bot will switch the labels for him. So that's pretty easy to extend if you wish to. It's still a bit buggy, so it will crash every now and then. And when it crashes, it just does not respond to the command, but will be restarted after 2 minutes, which is a big advantage of having something stateless. And there is a lot of things to do, like infer the backport target from the milestone, for example. Like instead of saying backport to 5x, backport to 6x, just do backport, and it would backport automatically, or even have it react not when you mention it, but when you actually merge a PR which is tagged for an earlier milestone. It could automatically infer that it needs to backport and emit the backport PR. For now, there is no per repository config. It's possible, but I haven't implemented it. For now, it's synchronous, which means that if an action or if a command takes 2 minutes, you cannot emit other commands during this time, or they will be queued and they might be killed after. But I need to do that. Document it. And also right now, there is a whitelist of people who are allowed to ask the bot to do things. Just because I don't trust myself with security, and if I had get some review, I would be happy to remove the limitation. And if we remove the limitation, it means that anybody can enable the bot on their repository, and it should just work. And you can enable on a per repository basis, on a per organization basis, and it should keep credentials separate. And that's about it. If you have any questions, I can stop sharing my screen and look at the comments in the chat. Have any questions? Nope.
Very useful. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
One, I could imagine that different repositories would want to have different commands and different actions, or different labels, or different milestones. Would it be possible to build a declarative syntax for those actions and then store that representation of those actions in a special file in a repository. So basically, individual repositories could save that file with a declarative back.
So yes, and GitHub gives you the possibility for your integration to ask access to a single file in a repository. So you can have the bot have not access to the repository, but to a single file, and this file could have the configuration. Though, I think that most of the configurations that people would want is a custom executable code, like a Python script. The problem is then you have arbitrary code execution. Still, if I had a bigger box and was more informed, more skills with Docker, what you could do is actually spawn the box could spawn a Meeseeks in a Docker container and pass only the credential to the repository where actions are required. So that basically you have a short-lived Docker instance that can access only to this repository, which would avoid security issue. And then you can not only make it declarative, but make it basically arbitrary code execution.
Yeah, the types of things I'm thinking of are more like there's certain events that can happen, right? PR opened, issue opened, issue commented on, and then there's certain actions you could take based on that, such as add this label, remove this label. And I think there's a lot of workflow things that individual projects may use those things differently. And most of those could be done declaratively. I definitely understand there's a broader set that would require arbitrary code, but being able to say, hey, in this repository, when someone closes an issue, take this action. And I think those, and so yeah, it would be a subset of the possible things, but that might be a nice way of allowing per repo customization. But cool.
Yes, and I'm thinking also that this declarative file could have finer grained permissions than GitHub. So you can say, oh, this person in particular is allowed to close an open issue or is allowed to tag issue without giving them commit rights. So that's definitively something I want to work on, except I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But contributions are welcome, and I can easily give anyone access to both the repository and where it's deployed on Heroku. The other thing I want to do is to have two versions, one which is in development and one which is stable, so that you can make experiments that only some people have access to, and another one where we know it works.
Great, very cool.
Other questions, comments for Matthias? A lot of good feedback in the chat, Matthias. Good juju. Wonderful. All right. So at this time, I'd love to open up this session to just more general questions and general discussion. If folks have questions or topics, project management tool related topics that they would like to bring up. I'm happy you're all still awake and engaged. Haven't seen any yawns. Although I can't see Jason in the tray, so he's my yawner.
I have another question that I think both Jamie and Grant alluded to, and that is, what does project management look like when a significant fraction or the majority of our sort of detailed tasks are represented by GitHub issues, but the meta things like tracking releases aren't, and sort of it's just not clear, like do we track things only in issues, even that meta stuff? Do we have another layer that is the meta layer that is not in GitHub, or it's just in project boards? It seems like a challenging thing to balance, and I just don't know what best practices are or how other organizations handle those types of things.
Well, I can speak for myself, having worked in the in the meta layer at other orgs. Usually there are other tools that you use. So AHA is a product management tool that helps track the big picture. So vision, features, and once those features are created, then the GitHub issues are created, and those live under the features. The fun thing about this project is it's very grassroots. So the features and the development bubble up from the atomic units of issues instead of being top down, where we start from the top and start breaking it down into work packets or work packages. So that's fun. But yeah, usually I've used other tools that allow for a greater level of hierarchy, more hierarchical levels in tracking the work.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and it's varied. It's ranged from big pieces of software to Excel spreadsheets, depending on the organization and project.
But if I understand correctly, you're thinking that those other types of tools may not be helpful for us, or?
Well, I really strike the balance in overkill. How do we adopt a gigantic product management software tool that is so extensive that most of my time is spent configuring this tool versus actually creating useful gadgets for tracking the work, right? Like something like Jira takes a little bit of work to set up. Something like the AHA would take some time to set up. I think AHA would be a really great tool for us to use if it didn't have to be the system of record. So the way AHA works is you create your whole path in AHA, and you create the GitHub issues through AHA instead of the way that we're doing it now, which is creating everything in GitHub and then linking it back to AHA. It doesn't have that functionality. It all has to go through the tool first. So that just won't work for us. What I would love to do is take some of the features that they have in there, some of which there are equivalents in the open source world, and start kind of piecing together our own toolkit. So the Pulse tool that Carol has shared, that exists, that type of thing exists in AHA, and the email updates. We don't really need the email updates to the team because we all pretty much live in GitHub, so there could be a page that people check to get the updates. The visualization of progress that we can also store in another tool, an open source tool, and link to through GitHub. So I'm really trying to I'm trying to incorporate these tools that are in some of these larger systems and pull them into GitHub. So we just kind of have this one-stop shopping for the development and some of the higher level work, not in the sense of, just in terms of the ideas that we're working with, the generalities, levels of generalities.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah. What else would be useful for the team? I was talking to to folks over the last couple of weeks, and folks are fairly satisfied with the development process. I like to ask the question, and I created an issue for it that I linked in the chat. What are tools and approaches that you've used in other organizations that worked and you would love to fold into our process? And when I say process, I mean the way that we do things, the way that we work, not necessarily some external force that we try to adhere to, but really like what's the most organic flow for us, and what's worked for you in other areas. From the couple of people that I talked with, they actually really like the way that this team works. So, I think that the team works really well together. People continue to push code and make releases, and it's very, like, as a project manager, so far it's been, I haven't had to get in your business too much, which is nice. I know that we're trying to create more structure, so there's more clarity and communication. But I do get the overall sense that folks are fairly satisfied with the way that day-to-day work goes, and that there's some bigger issues that come up that we need to have structure to work through, or need tools to help accommodate things like the growth and the increase in communication channels and things of that nature. So let me just pose the question: is there anything in other projects that any processes or tools that folks have used in other projects that they've found useful?
This is Carol. I'll go back to when I was doing documentation. The single biggest thing that would have helped me was having a release calendar, at least having a 2-week window of what was going to come out in the next 2 weeks, just so that I would know that the documentation was in place and it wouldn't be, oh, it just happened. So I think from the standpoint of somebody who's doing a specific task like documentation, unless each individual team is going to do it going forward, I think that's useful.
Okay. Yeah, so what do we need to do to get there? I think, Steve, you did a good job posting that the 0.17 release would be coming out. Thomas posted the 5.0 release would be coming out. The 5.0 release, I know, was a surprise to some folks. So, what do we need to do to start thinking about it 2 weeks before the release is going to come out instead of the day before?
I would love to see a standard chart at the bottom of the weekly dev meeting, or a separate markdown file that had all the releases that just rolled up based on date. It could be a simple markdown file, and it's pretty much what we're doing already, but just formalizing it, so that the dates can't slip or something, but it's really more, hey, this is coming.
So the milestone can have a date. We can try to enforce more the dates on the milestone and automatically aggregate dates.
The issue that I see is that there's a lot of organizations that are impacted by our releases that don't pay attention to any GitHub repository or our dev meeting notes. And I think our only hope of reaching them is either our mailing list or even Twitter. And I'm not posing that. I'm not necessarily suggesting that we have to warn Twitter that we're about to release something, but and honestly, there's many of even our core devs that are not able to follow all of our repositories or even look through our meeting notes each week. And so I continue to think some sort of broadcast mechanism that's going to reach far beyond core devs is pretty important in terms of release, just letting people know there's a release coming. And so I don't know how to do it better than our mailing list, but that's definitely one way to reach that broader audience that is impacted by those releases.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great comment in terms of communicating our releases, and I think we can continue to take advantage of our the tools that we have, and maybe find a way to create some sort of a release workflow, an automated release workflow, so that when something does go out, you walk through some steps. If it's not automated, at least have a checklist. But I do want to go back to my question: how do we know that in 2 weeks we're going to make a release? And this is me trying to get to know the team too. Like, when you're working, are you able to know that you're going to be finished in a couple weeks, or is it magic when you're done and you're like, this looks pretty good, I think I'll release this now? Or what is our thought process around releases?
It depends on the software. There are some things that we will probably, like if you have one bug report, we will merge a PR and make a release immediately, because it's something which is really slow moving.
Sure.
And other things we can see it coming roughly from far away. The problem is we need a single point where we can assume people will read it, so that it has to be there. So that if we decide, okay, we are making a weekly blog post with everything which is going to that might happen in 2 weeks, then you have to assume that people will read this one and have to. That's the only way we can be sure that everyone knows something. We can't go and fetch everyone.
Okay, so in our weekly meeting notes, we're starting to keep track of the releases. So, and in my trial release calendar, I'm tracking the like the in progress releases. So I guess
this week meeting notes were not summarized because I was stuck somewhere.
Right, but we're still tracking the releases in the Dropbox paper. So that's a section that regularly shows up in our raw meeting notes, not the fancy ones that you send out, but
we can assume that people can decide to assume that people read it. Like say, yeah, that's where the announcement here, and you're supposed to look there every week.
Yeah. So like Carol's question to me her question is, how do I know that there's a release coming? And my question is how do the developers know that that release is coming, that they're going to be like, are we able to say in 2 weeks, I'm going to make a release? And what you're saying is for some projects, it's very clear that the issues that are being resolved and the work that's being done is in an effort to meet a certain release target.
In some other no.
Yeah.
So it really depends on which project.
Right. Okay.
The best you can do is when you know something is going to come or has been done, say it in the Tuesday meeting.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
That's the only common point I can see where you can do something.
But also,
yeah, I agree with Matthias. I think it's sorry, Brian. I think it's just like an organic, non-automated approach to it, and the onus is on each like Jupyter Hub organization or Jupyter Lab organization to keep it updated weekly in the Dropbox paper. So at least we have something.
Okay.
I think one thing that also may help is if we can get to the point where we are more formally managing time-scoped projects, so that, for example, we don't declare a release like 2 weeks or right before we make it, that the second we start to work on release, many, many months beforehand, we put it in the project management system and saying, hey, this team has a time-scoped project of Jupyter Lab Beta. We're working on it over the next 6 months, and we'll post updates here on the schedule. I think that type of thing will, some of that is roadmap type information, but some of it is more sort of time-scoped project level management. And I think it makes a lot of sense for us to know ahead of time, like, all right, here's the time scope project that the kernel team is working on or the notebook lab team is working on, rather than knowing only a certain number of days before a release is actually cut. I think that would be helpful.
I agree.
Yeah, I think, and we haven't generally had a planned date for any release ever. But
yeah.
We do for the large projects, which, especially when they used to be just one. But that's still true for IPython and Notebook, at least. We go from normal development mode to it's time to get ready to release mode. And for the big projects, that always takes a month or so. So at least by whatever channel, and I think what make it clear that process is starting. And I think what was tricky about the notebook one being surprising to people was that was brought up at the meeting multiple times, multiple weeks in advance. And then people were still surprised after weeks of it being brought up at in the meetings.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure that the meetings or the meeting notes are necessarily. I think we have, at least at the current situation we're working. I'm not sure it's a good place to assume people are reading.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm quote, people being surprised at the 5.0 timeframe. I was one of them, and my current schedule does not. I'm not able to participate in the meetings, and I often don't read the notes. And I think one thing to know is I was aware that 5.0 was coming out. But the part that was opaque to me was where in the process we were. And so it's not necessarily just the date, but more the, like you said, man, we tend to switch gears. We have sort of a period where we're getting ready for the initial pre-release. Then we have the pre-release cycle, and that whole process was, even though I knew 5.0 was coming, it was completely opaque. And it's so. And I even somewhat follow that repository, and it was still opaque to me. And I think that's, we're working on it daily. Maybe it wasn't opaque, but I think this is where, going back to Fernando's oft-repeated statement that we need to optimize for part-time evenings, weekends developers, and that's where my surprise was basically sort of, yeah, I know 5.0 is coming, but is this coming tomorrow? Is it coming? I didn't know where exactly that was. And so it's not just about a date. It's about, I think, having like an issue where we can post regular comments about, all right, we're going to do another pre-release in 5 days, or, we've frozen guys, only bug fixes from now on, or a little more detail about that. That's the stuff that I'm struggling with, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a minute left here, and I just I want to thank everyone. Based on what we just talked about, I think it would be worthwhile for me to look into how to better visually represent our roadmap. And so that's something I can look into over the next, I'll be honest about timing, probably look at over the next couple months in terms of building something like that, but that may be useful for keeping track of the big picture. So I'm just thinking about a chart, like a Gantt style chart with bars and, the releases that we have planned. All right, well, thanks everyone. We might be getting kicked out. So I thank you so much for joining today. I feel like this was really productive. It was really productive for knowledge sharing and for seeing what folks have been working on. And feel free to comment on issue 44 in the project management repo and in the project management repo overall. So thanks again. And let's say goodbye to our internet audience. Bye, audience. Thanks.